With Hitler's armies now on an offensive across Europe, the Duke's tendency towards reckless indiscretion could now have serious consequences. The Germans were poised to invade France, and the Allies predicted the attack to come from one of three possible directions. The lowlands of Belgium, ideal for Hitler's tanks, the heavily defended Maginot Line, or through the densely wooded Ardennes. Hitler planned to attack across the lowlands and dispatched his battle plans by plane, but it crashed in Belgium. The pilot tried to destroy these critical papers, but the Germans didn't know whether they had fallen into Allied hands. Hitler stood down 50 divisions and waited. But not for long, because the Duke of Windsor told the German minister at The Hague that the Allied War Council had been discussing some German invasion plans rescued from a crashed plane. When Hitler heard of this, he quickly changed his attack. Wrong-footing the Allies, he sent his tanks through the lightly defended Ardennes. German armies swarmed into France, and by May 1940 were threatening Paris.
It is remarkable that Hitler and the Germans attacked just in the right place. Hitler and the Germans could not have done it any better. It was absolutely spot-on brilliant. But certainly allegations have been made against the Duke and Duchess of Windsor that they either knowingly or unknowingly helped the Germans in this regard.
Now the Duke would cause Winston Churchill further anxiety. Instead of evacuating with his regiment, he immediately fled, and with Wallace travelled south to Biarritz. His close friend and assistant Major Metcalfe returned to their quarters to find that the Duke had stripped them bare and taken all the cars. He wrote,
"He has run like two rabbits. He deserted his job in 1936. Well, he's deserted his country now. It's the end."
The newly released FBI files also reveal the Duchess's astonishing leaks to the Nazis via von Ribbentrop.
The Duchess was obtaining a variety of information concerning official activities which she was passing on to the Germans.
The files describe how the Windsors moved to a hotel in Biarritz. Within minutes of them checking in, the Duchess had informed von Ribbentrop of their whereabouts. To Churchill's alarm, Berlin radio were proudly able to announce not only where the Windsors were staying, but even their room number. While France was falling and thousands of British soldiers were being evacuated from Dunkirk, Wallace contacted the Gestapo to request that her maid be sent to collect some of their belongings from their Paris residence. Now Italy declared war on France, and to Churchill's consternation, the Duke and Duchess fled south again.
The Windsors had to leave the country, and instead of coming back to Britain, which is what they should have done, they went to fascist Spain, and they fell in with a large number of pretty dodgy people, dodgy businessmen, fascists, really the detritus of society.
The news of the Windsors' arrival in Madrid caused great excitement in Berlin. With France in German hands, Hitler believed that Britain would be next. He thought that Edward could be used to urge the British people to accept German occupation, with him returning as their king. All they had to do was grab him.
There was a German plan to send in paratroopers and kidnap the Duke and Duchess. And Winston Churchill was very keen indeed to get them back to Britain and out of harm's way.
Hitler's plan of using the Duke as a puppet king was not so far-fetched. Overhearing their conversation at table, the American ambassador wrote an alarm to the US Secretary of State.
The Duke of Windsor declared that the most important thing now to be done was to end the war before thousands more were killed or maimed to save the faces of a few politicians.
When Churchill heard of this, he ordered the Duke back to Britain or face a court-martial.
The Duke and Duchess of Windsor show themselves pretty much at their worst in this period, when they are making up any kind of excuses for not coming home.
To get them back to Britain, Churchill sends them to Portugal.
There's this cat and mouse game between both sides as they try to secure the Windsors for their own purposes.
The Duke and Duchess safely crossed the Portuguese border and headed for Estoril. But to Churchill's horror, they fell again into dubious company.
Portugal was neutral at that time, and I think that the concern of Winston was really that Estoril was rather a hotbed of German spies and one thing and another.
They were now put up by a wealthy Nazi supporter called Ricardo Silva.
They were fascists. He didn't mind that. He felt quite at home with that. The Duke of Windsor rather liked sort of hanging about the swimming pool of this rather right-wing Portuguese banker.
A British official in Lisbon, David Eccles, wrote,
I distrust the Duke of Windsor. I shall watch him at breakfast, lunch and dinner with a critical eye.
This was justified, as on July the 11th, the Duke would come out with his most damning and remarkable comment, which the German ambassador in Lisbon passed to Berlin.
The Duke believes with certainty that continued heavy bombing would make England ready for peace.
Hitler had the idea that the bombing of the United Kingdom would send people into a panic and would induce the British people to turn against the rulers. That there would be an opportunity to bring the Duke of Windsor back as the sovereign.
Churchill had to get them out of the way, and he scoured the globe, hitting upon the Bahamas as a place to send the Windsors into exile. So on the 1st of August 1940, having kept the ship waiting for 6 hours, the Duke and Duchess sailed from Lisbon, bound for the Bahamas. Just 1 year into the Second World War, and Britain's former king was seen as such a danger, he'd been sent into exile 4,000 miles away from Britain. The man who had once commanded an empire was now governor of the Bahamas. Even in this remote location, Churchill was taking no chances with the Duke. He warned, "May I venture a word of serious counsel? It will be necessary for the governor of the Bahamas to express views about the war and the general situation which are not out of harmony with the British government." Edward ignored him in spectacular fashion. In December 1940, he was offered an exclusive interview with American journalist Fulton Owsler, editor of Liberty magazine. Owsler was a friend of President Roosevelt, who, although sympathetic to Churchill, had not yet brought America into the war. When Owsler asked the Duke about the rumors of a revolution in Germany, he replied, "There will be no revolution in Germany. It would be a tragic thing for the world if Hitler were overthrown. Hitler is the right and logical leader of the German people. He is a great man. Tell Mr. Roosevelt that if he will make an offer of intervention for peace, that the Duke of Windsor will instantly issue a statement supporting it. And that will start a revolution in England that will force peace." Churchill was outraged, describing the Duke's words as defeatist and pro-Nazi. The article was heavily censored. 4 months later, when the Duke and Duchess arrived in Miami, Churchill and Roosevelt took no risks. The Windsors were put under 24-hour surveillance. The FBI built up a considerable mass of intelligence on the Windsors, their files painting a damning picture of their behavior and the threat they posed. The Duke and Duchess never fulfilled their 5-year term in the Bahamas. They announced their resignation in January 1945. Before leaving, the Duke was overheard as saying, "After the war is over and Hitler has crushed the Americans, we'll take over. The British don't want me as their king, but I'll be back as their leader." The Duke and Duchess, unwelcome in England, settled in France, where they remained in a luxurious house near Paris for the rest of their lives. Edward died in 1972. He was buried at Windsor Castle. Wallis lived until the age of 90. When she died in 1986, she was buried next to him. Her headstone read simply, "Wallis, Duchess of Windsor."
Und ich glaube nicht, dass die Gegner, die damals noch gelacht haben, heute auch noch lachen.